unfortunately, Australia hasn't played a positive role in the discussion, the global discussion, in particular in Madrid, I would say. And it's strange because in a way, Australia is suffering the impacts of global climate change. And the unique way to protect itself from that is really to be very active, to push other big emitters to go to carbon neutrality and to really cut emissions.
The Australian Prime Minister argues that using carryover credits is legitimate because it's like money that you've paid off a mortgage. What do you make of that analogy?
Well, one is that the Kyoto Protocol is meant to finish by 2020. And the Paris Agreement, and that, of course, all the negotiation on the carbon market that went through the Madrid talks, is really about the next regime starting in 2020 and not referring to a sort of a bank of a stock of credits that were issued in the previous regime, which is the Kyoto Protocol. So it's not legitimate. It doesn't refer to any legal element because the carbon market agreement is not totally done. And anyway, it's a post-2020 agreement. So that's a false argument. But there is a more concerning argument, which is a reality. And in reality, we have to cut emissions. And these Kyoto credits are, in a way, it's an equivalent of money, but it's not an equivalent of real emission reduction. So it's a dangerous game. And I hope that Australia very soon would stop playing that game.
So how dangerous is it for the overall international effort if Australia pushes ahead with the carryover credit argument, just in terms of setting a precedent for other countries?
Of course, that will open the door for anybody to say, look, in Kyoto, I negotiated emission reductions that were really a divergence for a deviation for business as usual. And in Kyoto at that time, nobody knew exactly how dear was the situation of the global warming. So it's really 1995 or 1997 for Kyoto Protocol, so many, many years ago. So the precedent would be terrible because, again, there are countries that have their stock, could refer to, I can refer to China, could refer to Brazil and many others, or Russia. And that will effectively, I think, kill Paris Agreement definitely.
So the whole agreement could unravel?
Absolutely, because again, remind us the goals of Paris Agreement is really to get to net zero emission by 2050 or very soon after. This means a real reduction of emissions. If we have countries that begin to say, look, I made efforts in the past, that could be accounted for now, where, global emissions are rising, every emission are rising. And so if you don't reduce this emission effectively, because you just refer to some accounting mechanism, that will not change global warming. Global warming doesn't count on accounting, it's just real emissions. So that will open a loophole that would encourage other countries to cheat, and we will really unravel Paris goal.
So do you want Scott Morrison to immediately drop that push for carryover credits? Because he said Australia might not now need the credits to meet that target in 2030, but he still hasn't ruled out using them.
I think that the first step for the Australian government would be to say, we will not use these credits. That would be super positive. That would send a message to others. That would allow for next year, this year, a sound negotiation on carbon market, because we need carbon markets. We need good carbon markets. So that's the first step. And the second step, in my view, and it resonates with many provinces of Australia and cities, is to commit for a long-term target that is really going to net zero. And with these two signals, I think, Australia could make a very, very strong contribution to this year, which is a decisive year for climate.
How do you feel about seeing what has happened with Australia's bushfires over the last few months, and when you line that up against Australia's attitude at the moment to the global effort to address climate change?
Well, it's terrible to see these fires, and I think that the whole global community is really looking at this terrible catastrophe and feel for Australia. I feel for Indonesia as well, where the floods are terrible as well, and there are so many events that have been happening last year. So I think it's a terrible image, and we are suffering for Australia and for the wildlife and for the people and for the toxic air pollution you are suffering and going through. So I can't imagine that the public, the civil society, the businesses, the cities, everyone should ask now for a strong climate policy. And it's possible. Again, the government can make two very important steps. Just say, I will drop this idea of using the Kyoto credit, really think through a very serious climate policy, which allow for economic development and growth, of course, which is based on really a good innovation and technology. And at the same time, just give a long-term goal, which I think would open the window for serious discussion. And that would be the signal we need from Australia this year.